And as you can see, our theme here is going to be what these politicians had to say, how we can look back to the future. That was an 80s movie, wasn't it, Sparky, Back to the Future? I think that was 1988.
Are you telling me that you built a time machine out of a DeLorean?
Back to the future is where we go, because what these politicians, in this case Trump versus that other alternative candidate, this one on the left, Bernie Sanders. People are a little bit tired of the Jeb Bushes of the world, the establishment candidates on the right, and so Trump has become a viable option, but people are also really, really sick of the Clintons, and Hillary Clinton in particular, and so the left is looking for its quote-unquote alternative candidate. Isn't it interesting that on the right, we turn our attention to somebody outside the political arena, somebody who has not been a politician, as an alternative to establishment status quo. Where on the left, who do they turn to on the left? That old, mummified socialist Bernie Sanders. So, in honor of the 80s, we've got a little 80s video for you. Let it roll, Spark. Doesn't that bring back memories of your 80s game console? And I love the fact that our tech people got the hair so good, from Bernie Sanders' Frankenstein look to Donald Trump flopping, I don't know what you'd call that, comb over? I'm not sure what it is. But in any event, going back to the 80s, we've already talked about how, for Donald Trump, wealth is a key. It's been a key for the last 30 years. A richer America, a more prosperous America, is an America that's better for everybody. But then on the left, who do we have as our alternative candidate? We've got Bernie Sanders. And his entire premise is more socialism, more debt. This is the left-wing progressive argument here. We need a more socialist America, a more indebted America, a more taxed, a more regulated America. That's going to fix everything. And if we go back all the way to the 1980s, say what you will about that fade comb-over of Donald Trump. In some ways, it's a little bit preferable, isn't it? I don't know what's going on at the top of and look, I'm one to talk, but at least I knew enough to shave my head before it ever came to this. Listen to what Bernie Sanders said all the way back in a 1989 interview on C-SPAN.
And our view is that government has the right to get involved in any area that makes sense. You don't get involved in areas where it doesn't make sense.
1989, Sparky. Government has the right. Who gave them that right? Government has the right to get involved in any area they think they should get involved in, right? Let me ask you this. We've seen how America's gone from a relatively rich, prosperous country. 1988, the Berlin Wall had fallen. America was the sole superpower, the richest country in the history of the world. Have we gotten more wealthy under politics' status quo? Now you got Bernie Sanders in 1989, 1 year after the Trump interview, telling us that what we need is a government that's not afraid to get involved in any aspect of our lives if they feel it should be done. Who gets to determine who intervenes and how? And ask yourselves this question out there in TV land. Has government intervened more in the last 30 years? And has that intervention been good? Is it really a good thing that we're using eminent domain to close up shop for people, to confiscate land? Is it really better off that we've nationalized healthcare? Are people better off, or even poor people better off that we've nationalized healthcare? In what way has all of this government interventionism really helped us? And the really frustrating thing and frightening thing about Bernie Sanders is he hasn't changed. It's government's job to regulate, to intervene, to control, to micromanage any aspect of American life provided it sees fit. I love his caveat at the end. We don't get involved in things that don't belong to us. Well, as recently as 10 years ago, marriage didn't belong to you. As recently as 10 years ago, none of this stuff, healthcare didn't belong to you. Seems to me that once you let a socialist loose with his eraser, he's erasing all constitutional rules, regulations, all constitutional checks and balances in the name of the almighty federal government. But let's go back even further with Bernie Sanders, because, you can go back, you can't really go back that far with Trump, but you can certainly go back to the 1970s with Bernie Sanders as a young socialist, a little socialist light, a little baby socialist percolating in the early 1970s. Bernie Sanders, your left-wing hero of minority rights, wrote a really disturbing article, you can see it there on the screen, written in the Vermont Freeman in 1972, titled poetically, Man and Woman by Bernie Sanders. Can't you picture the socialist with a good warm glass of down-to-earth mead, gazing out the window, right, giving us his reflections on man and woman. I'm not going to read you this article because you can find it online, but the things he says are shocking. Basically, one long detestable little essay in male dominance and female submission standards, all sorts of self-gratification imagery taking place here, all sorts of really troglodytic worldviews. Now, I know. Whenever a left-winger says stuff like this, the leftist posse rides to his defense. So you're getting all these justifications for what Bernie Sanders said. He was really trying to unmake gender roles by writing all that nonsense. Okay, whatever. Mostly what you hear from the left on this is silence. My point is, Bernie Sanders, that mad little scientist in the attic, has the right to write whatever he wants. He can take any position he wants to take. But if it had been a Republican who said that, if you had something like that, think about the missteps and gaffes, some of the goofy things Donald Trump has said. They've been front and center with us every aspect of this campaign, where the long socialist history of Bernie Sanders has largely been covered up and obscured and protected by a liberal media who's promoting an agenda. But let's look a little bit deeper at Bernie Sanders. This is your leftist hero. This is the great champion of social justice and Marxism. Free market economies be damned, right? Well, Media Research Center reports that socialist Bernie Sanders, who sponsored legislation to raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour, pays his own interns just $12 an hour. Now that would be what, deflation, Sparky? Right? What is that, by the way? Is that socialism? Right. $15 will pay everybody else, but Bernie's going to pay his own interns $12. At a recent campaign fundraiser, this in the year 2015, in Tony Martha's Vineyard, where all the hoi polloi go, where the Obamas seem to have set up an alternative White House, Sanders bleated that, quote, money cannot be the god of life, even as he solicited big dollar donations from mega-rich donors. In fact, in order to attend this socialist event, a minimum donation on the part of participants of $37,000 was required. Do the math for me, Spark. How many interns can you pay $12 an hour for $37,000? How many interns could have gone to that for that? Sanders also raked in many hundreds of thousands of dollars from extortionist labor unions and, wait for it, the very super PACs he condemns as the bane of the American political landscape. Radical progressive labor unions, thug labor unions, and left-wing super PACs, giving him hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. The socialist obviously does not have much of a problem with big money, big special interest. According to the site Money Nation, Sanders' net worth versus median U.S. household net worth is 7.8 times larger than the average middle American home. 7.8 times. Now, that's not the 230 times larger the Clintons boast. But it's embarrassing nonetheless for a career politician preaching socialism to the rest of us. And I'd like to pause there for a quick second. This is not somebody who went out and created wealth. This is not somebody who's ever really employed anybody except $12 an hour interns, or I guess you can afford those. This is not somebody who's created wealth. This is not somebody who's met payroll. This is not somebody, Bernie Sanders, who, to be completely honest, ever really had a real job. His whole socialist worldview has been nurtured, grown, developed in the quiet comfort of a mayor in Vermont, one of the most lefty states in the Union, has elected him to the Senate multiple times. His whole career has been set in the public sector, spending your money, not saving it, not protecting it. As a matter of fact, Bernie Sanders' proposal, his big proposal that has the left all a-Twitter-pated, is an $18 trillion tax increase. According to the Wall Street Journal, $18 trillion. Now, if you've been paying attention, you know that we've managed to rack up a good part of this under the Obama administration, by the way. We as a country have racked up about $18 trillion in debt. Since George Washington, all the way through George Bush, we've racked up $18 trillion. Obama now has contributed a huge lion's share to that, and our Bernie Sanders, the socialist answer, wants to double that. Get us to $36 trillion in new spending, taxing, and entitlements. This is indeed back to the future.